The ocean breeze lifted my white dress as I stood barefoot on the sand, holding a bouquet of pale pink roses. I should have felt beautiful. I should have felt like the luckiest woman alive. Instead, I counted the empty chairs lined up on either side of the makeshift aisle, and my heart cracked a little more with each one. 40 chairs. I had rented 40 white folding chairs decorated with flowing blue ribbons that matched the sea behind us. 39 of them sat empty. Only Simone, my best friend since college, occupied a seat in the front row. She smiled at me with tears streaming down her face, trying to pour enough love into that moment for 20 people. The officiant, a kind woman named Barbara, gave me a gentle look. "Are we ready to begin?" she asked quietly. I nodded even though I wanted to run. Even though I wanted to call my mother and ask her one more time why she couldn't come. Why none of them could come. "It's too casual, Natasha," my mother had said on the phone 3 weeks ago. "A beach wedding? With less than 50 guests? Honey, your cousin Brielle had 300 people at her reception. At the Four Seasons. This just feels so small. Small." That word had stung worse than any insult. My father had been even more direct. "I'm not wasting my Saturday on some backyard affair," he'd said. "When you decide to do this properly, let us know." My 2 sisters, Renee and Tasha, had simply declined through text. "Can't make it. Have plans." "Congrats though." Derek, my soon-to-be husband, squeezed my hand. "Hey," he whispered. "Look at me. Not the chairs. Me." I turned to face him. Derek had kind brown eyes and a smile that had made me fall in love with him at a tech conference 2 years ago. He wore a simple blue suit that matched the ocean. Nothing fancy. Nothing extravagant. Just honest and real. "We don't need them," he said softly. "I promise you, Natasha. We're going to build something beautiful together. Just us." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. Barbara cleared her throat and began the ceremony. Her words about love and commitment floated over the sound of the waves. Simone sniffled loudly and I heard her blow her nose. Under different circumstances I would have laughed. But all I could think about was my mother's voice. Too casual. Too small. Not worthy of their time. When Barbara asked if anyone objected to our marriage, the silence that followed felt massive. It wasn't just that no one objected. It was that no one was there to object. No one was there to support us either. No grandparents wiping away tears. No siblings recording the moment on their phones. No parents beaming with pride. Just empty chairs with blue ribbons fluttering in the wind. "I do," Derek said when his turn came. His voice was steady and certain. "I do," I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. We exchanged simple gold bands. No diamonds. No family heirlooms passed down through generations. Just 2 rings we picked out together at a small jewelry store in town. When Derek kissed me, Simone cheered loud enough for 20 people. She ran up to hug us both, her mascara creating dark trails down her cheeks. "That was beautiful," she said, squeezing us tight. "The most beautiful wedding I've ever seen." I smiled, but inside I felt hollow. We took pictures with Barbara and Simone. We cut a small 2-tier cake that sat on a table nearby. We danced to a song playing from Derek's phone speaker. "Your family doesn't deserve you," Simone said later, as we sat on the sand watching the sun start to set. Derek had gone to return the rental chairs. "I mean that, Natasha. They're missing out on knowing the most incredible person I've ever met. They think I'm making a mistake," I said quietly. "Marrying someone who doesn't come from money. Having a small wedding instead of some big production. Not caring enough about status and appearances." Simone shook her head. "No, honey. They made the mistake. And someday they're going to realize exactly what they lost." I leaned my head on her shoulder and watched the waves roll in. I didn't know if she was right. All I knew was that my wedding day, which should have been filled with joy, was marked by the absence of everyone who was supposed to love me most. Derek returned and sat down on my other side. He put his arm around me and we watched the ocean together in silence. This was my family now. My husband and my best friend. Maybe Simone was right. Maybe that would be enough. But as I stared at those empty chairs being folded up and stacked by the rental company workers, I made myself a promise. I would never forget this feeling. This abandonment. This rejection. And I would never, ever let them hurt me like this again. I didn't know it then, but that promise would change everything. 6 months of marriage passed in a blur of work and renovation plans. Derek spent long hours at his startup, developing some kind of security software I only half understood. I threw myself into my interior design business, taking on more clients than I probably should have. We barely spoke to my family during those months. My mother called once, asking casually how married life was treating me. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes before she had to go. Your father and I are redecorating the living room, she said. You know, we could use your professional opinion. Why don't you come by? But she didn't actually want my professional opinion. She wanted to criticize whatever I suggested and then hire someone else. I'd learned that lesson years ago. I'm booked solid for the next 3 months, I lied. Maybe after that. She made a non-committal sound and hung up. That was the last time we spoke. Derek and I found the property in March. It sat on 2 acres, a sprawling estate that had been abandoned for 5 years. The previous owner, some tech millionaire who'd moved to Singapore, had let it fall into disrepair. The roof leaked. The pool was filled with algae. Windows were cracked and the garden looked like a jungle. It's perfect, I said the moment I saw it. Derek looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Natasha, it's a disaster. No, I insisted, walking through the overgrown path to the front door. It's a blank canvas. The asking price was $3.2 million. With Derek's startup finally turning profitable and my design business bringing in steady income, we could actually afford it. Barely. We made an offer of $2.8 million and held our breath. They accepted. For the next 4 months, that house became my entire world. I worked with contractors during the day and sketched designs late into the night. Derek handled all the technical stuff, the wiring and security systems. I focused on making it beautiful. You're obsessed, Simone said one afternoon, finding me elbow deep in paint samples. She'd stopped by my home office with coffee and bagels. I haven't seen you eat a real meal in days. I need to get this right, I told her, holding up 2 nearly identical shades of cream. This house is going to be everything. A French provincial style? Or stick with modern? Why not both? Simone suggested. Mix them. That's your signature style anyway. Classic meets contemporary. She was right. That's exactly what I did. I designed a home that blended old-world elegance with clean modern lines. Marble countertops in the kitchen with sleek stainless appliances. Crystal chandeliers hanging in rooms with minimalist furniture. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a rolling ladder, but filled with contemporary art. Every choice I made felt personal. This wasn't just about creating a beautiful space. This was about proving something. To myself maybe. Or to the family that had dismissed me. Derek seemed happy with my plans, though he was increasingly absent. His startup was expanding, taking on new investors. He'd hired a business partner, some woman named Gabrielle who had experience in tech sales. She's brilliant, Derek told me one night over takeout. We were eating Chinese food surrounded by fabric swatches and tile samples. She's already brought in 3 major clients. That's great, I said, not really paying attention. I was trying to decide between 2 types of hardwood flooring. You should meet her sometime, Derek continued. I think you two would get along. Sure, I agreed absently. Whenever. I never did meet her. I was too busy turning that broken estate into something magnificent. By August, the renovations were nearly complete. The house had been transformed. 5 bedrooms, each with its own unique design. 4 bathrooms with Italian marble and custom fixtures. A gourmet kitchen that would make any chef weep. A pool that sparkled like a jewel. Gardens bursting with roses, lavender, and jasmine. The final appraisal came back at $5.5 million. We did it, Derek said when the appraiser left. He picked me up and spun me around, laughing. Baby, we actually did it. I hugged him back, feeling proud and exhausted and accomplished. We'd created something valuable together. Something that was ours. I took pictures of every room, documenting the transformation. I posted some on my business Instagram, which had grown to 15,000 followers. The response was immediate. This is incredible, one comment read. Where is this property? Are you taking new clients? Asked another. But the most interesting message came from a producer named Helen Rodriguez. I work for Luxury Spaces, a home design show on HGTV. We'd love to feature your estate. Are you interested? I stared at that message for a full minute. A television show wanted to feature my work. My design. The house that I'd poured my heart and soul into. Yes, I typed back. I'm very interested. I didn't tell my family. Why would I? They hadn't cared about my wedding, my business, or my life. This achievement was mine alone. Or so I thought. 3 weeks later, the film crew arrived. They spent 2 full days shooting every angle, interviewing me about my design choices, capturing the morning light in the breakfast nook and the sunset glow in the master bedroom. Helen was enthusiastic about everything. This is going to be our season premiere, she told me. Your story is perfect. Self-made designer transforms abandoned estate into modern masterpiece. Viewers are going to love this. The episode was scheduled to air in October. I marked the date on my calendar and tried not to think about it too much. I had other projects to focus on. Other clients who wanted my help transforming their spaces. But in the back of my mind I wondered, would my family see it? Would they even care? I should have known the answer. I should have prepared myself for what was coming. Because when that episode finally aired, everything changed. The episode premiered on a Thursday night. I'd invited Simone over to watch it with me. We sat on my new cream-colored sofa with a bottle of wine and too much cheese, giggling nervously as the opening credits rolled. "I can't believe you're on TV," Simone said, squeezing my hand. "You're a literal celebrity now." "I'm not a celebrity," I protested. "They're just showing my house." But then my face filled the screen and I felt my stomach flip. There I was, wearing a burgundy dress, standing in the foyer of the estate. The camera panned slowly across the space, capturing the curved staircase with its wrought iron railings, the crystal chandelier, the marble floors. This property was abandoned for 5 years, my television self said. Most people saw a disaster. I saw potential. The show cut to before and after shots. The cracked windows replaced with floor-to-ceiling glass. The overgrown garden transformed into a paradise of flowering plants and stone pathways. The murky pool now crystal clear and inviting. Helen's voiceover explained my design philosophy, my attention to detail, my ability to blend classic and contemporary elements. They showed the library, the kitchen, the master suite with its balcony overlooking the gardens. "Natasha Williams has created more than just a beautiful home," Helen said as the camera slowly pulled back to show the entire estate at sunset. "She's created a masterpiece." The credits rolled. Simone and I screamed and jumped up and down like teenagers. "That was perfect," Simone said, hugging me. "Natasha, that was absolutely perfect. You're going to get so many clients from this." My phone started buzzing immediately. Instagram notifications. Facebook messages. Emails flooding my business account. I scrolled through them, overwhelmed by the sheer volume. "This is insane," I muttered, watching the numbers climb. "I've gotten 200 new followers in the last 10 minutes. But then I saw the text messages. Dozens of them. From numbers I hadn't heard from in months. "My cousin Brielle, OMG, just saw you on TV. The house is gorgeous. We need to catch up." "My sister Renee, why didn't you tell us about the TV show? Congrats." "My Aunt Patricia, that estate is stunning. Your mother must be so proud." And then at 8:47 p.m. my father's message appeared, "Family meeting. 8 p.m. tomorrow. Urgent." I stared at that text for a long time. Simone looked over my shoulder and made a disgusted sound. "Urgent?" she read aloud. "Now it's urgent. Where was urgent when you got married? Where was urgent when you started your business?" "They saw the show," I said quietly. "Of course they did. Everyone saw the show. It's the season premiere of a major network program." Simone grabbed my phone and scrolled through the messages. "Look at this. Every single person who ignored you is suddenly your best friend. It's pathetic." She was right. It was pathetic. But it also hurt in a way I hadn't expected. Part of me, some small foolish part, had hoped my family would reach out because they genuinely cared. Because they'd realized their mistake and wanted to make amends. But the timing made their intentions crystal clear. They hadn't seen me on television and felt proud. They'd seen me on television and smelled opportunity. "Are you going to go?" Simone asked carefully. I thought about it. The smart thing would be to ignore the message. To block their numbers and move on with my life. But I was curious. I wanted to see exactly what they wanted. I wanted to look them in the eyes and understand what kind of people could abandon their daughter on her wedding day and then come crawling back the moment she achieved success. "Yeah," I said finally. "I'm going." "Then I'm coming with you," Simone declared. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to." "Someone needs to have your back in there, and we both know it won't be them." The next evening, Derek offered to come with me, but I told him no. This was something I needed to face alone. Well, alone with Simone. "Are you sure?" he asked, looking concerned. "I know how your family can be." "I'm sure," I said, though I wasn't sure of anything. "It's just dinner. I'll be fine." I chose my outfit carefully. A green silk blouse and black slacks. Professional but not trying too hard. I wanted to look successful without appearing like I was showing off. Simone drove us to my parents' house in her Honda. The familiar neighborhood looked the same as always. Perfectly manicured lawns. Expensive cars in every driveway. The kind of place where people measured worth by square footage and car brands. You ready? Simone asked as we pulled up. No, I admitted. But let's do this anyway. We walked up to the front door. I could see movement inside through the windows. Multiple people. They'd gathered the whole family for this urgent meeting. I rang the doorbell and waited, my heart pounding. The door opened and there was my mother wearing a bright smile I didn't trust. Natasha, sweetheart, she said, pulling me into a hug I didn't return. We're so glad you could make it. And Simone, how lovely to see you. Simone gave her a tight smile and said nothing. We walked inside and I saw them all. My father sitting in his usual chair. My sisters on the sofa. My aunt and uncle. My cousins. All of them turning to look at me with expressions that ranged from curious to calculating. There she is, my father said, standing up. Our television star. His tone was joking, but there was something underneath it. Something hungry. I stayed standing near the door, keeping my escape route clear. Simone positioned herself next to me, a silent support. You wanted to talk? I said, keeping my voice neutral. My mother laughed, a high tinkling sound. Oh, honey, we just wanted to congratulate you properly. That show was wonderful. We had no idea you'd accomplished so much. I told you about the house, I said quietly. 6 months ago. When we first bought it. An uncomfortable silence followed. My sister Renee cleared her throat. Well, we didn't realize it was going to be on television, she said. That's a pretty big deal, Natasha. So you only care now because other people know about it? The words came out sharper than I intended. My father's expression darkened. That's not fair. We're your family. We've always cared about your success. Really? I felt Simone's hand on my arm, warning me to stay calm. But months of hurt and anger were bubbling up. Where was that care on my wedding day? Where was it when I started my business and could have used support? Your wedding was very intimate, my mother said carefully. We thought you wanted privacy. I wanted my family, I said simply. But that's not why I'm here. You said this was urgent. So what do you actually want? My father and mother exchanged a look. Here it comes, I thought. Well, my father began, settling back into his chair. Since you asked, I'm looking for an investor for my business expansion. And with your new success, I thought perhaps we could. I didn't let him finish. I turned and walked out the door. I made it halfway to Simone's car before my mother caught up to me. Natasha, wait, she called out, hurrying down the driveway in her heels. You're being dramatic. Come back inside so we can discuss this like adults. I spun around to face her. Discuss what, exactly? How you all ignored me until you saw dollar signs. How Dad wants me to invest in his failing business after he couldn't be bothered to attend my wedding. My mother's face flushed. That business isn't failing. It's expanding. And you're his daughter. Family helps family. Family shows up for family, I shot back. Family doesn't wait until someone's on television to suddenly remember they exist. I got in the car. Simone started the engine immediately and we drove away. I could see my mother standing in the driveway, hands on her hips, watching us leave. Well, that went exactly as expected, Simone said dryly. I laughed, but it came out shaky. My hands were trembling. I should have known. I should have known they'd want something. Hey, you're allowed to hope your family might actually care about you. That's not naive. That's human. Simone reached over and squeezed my hand. But now you know for sure. You don't owe them anything. When I got home, Derek was working late again. The house felt enormous and empty. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the library, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your behavior tonight was disrespectful. We raised you better than that. I almost threw my phone across the room. Instead, I blocked his number. Then my mother's. Then both my sisters. Felt good. Like cutting away dead weight. Over the next week, I focused on work. New client inquiries poured in after the television episode. I scheduled consultations, created design proposals, threw myself into projects. It was easier than thinking about my family. Derek seemed distracted. He came home late most nights, claiming the business was demanding. I barely noticed. I was too busy building my empire. Then Simone showed up at my house on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced. She looked upset, her usual smile completely absent. We need to talk, she said, walking past me into the living room. And you're not going to like what I have to say. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? Simone sat down heavily on the sofa. She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times and handed it to me. I was having lunch downtown today, she said quietly. At that Italian place on 5th Street. and I saw Derek. The phone showed a photo. Derek sitting in a booth, and across from him was a woman I didn't recognize. She was beautiful with long dark hair and a bright smile. They were leaning close, holding hands across the table. "Who is she?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "I followed them after lunch," Simone continued. "They went to the Madison Hotel. Room 412. They were in there for 2 hours. The room started spinning. I sat down before I fell down. "Her name is Gabrielle," Simone said. I asked around. "She's his business partner. Apparently this isn't the first time they've been seen together." I stared at the photo. Derek's face looked happy, relaxed, the way he used to look at me. "How long?" I whispered. "I don't know for sure, but I made some calls. One of my friends works at the Madison. She says they've been coming in every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months. 3 months. While I was working on the house. While I was building my business. While I was dealing with my family's rejection. Derek had been sleeping with someone else." "I'm sorry," Simone said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Natasha. I debated whether to tell you, but you deserve to know." I nodded numbly. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to cry. But mostly I felt cold. Calculating. "I need you to send me everything," I said. "Every photo. Every detail. Everything you found out." Simone looked surprised. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to protect myself," I said simply. "The house is in both our names. Our bank accounts are joint. His business is half funded by my income. I need to know exactly where I stand before I do anything." "You're not going to confront him?" Simone asked. "Not yet. First I need information. Then I need a plan." I stood up, my mind already racing. "Can you recommend a good divorce lawyer?" "Oh, honey." Simone pulled me into a hug. "I know 3 excellent ones." That night, Derek came home at his usual late hour. He kissed my cheek and asked about my day. "Same as always," I lied smoothly. "Busy with clients." "How was work?" "Exhausting," he said, loosening his tie. "But good. Gabrielle closed another major deal today." "Gabrielle." He said her name so casually. Like she was just a colleague. Like he hadn't spent the afternoon in a hotel room with her. "That's great," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "You should celebrate." "We grabbed a quick dinner," he said. "Nothing fancy." Another lie. I wondered how many lies he'd told me over the past 3 months. How many times he'd claimed to be working late when he was actually with her. "I'm heading to bed," I said. "Don't stay up too late." I went upstairs to our bedroom. Our beautiful bedroom that I'd designed so carefully. The bed with its luxury linens. The sitting area by the window. Everything perfect and beautiful and built on lies. I pulled out my laptop and started researching divorce lawyers. Simone had sent me 3 names. I read reviews, checked credentials, looked at success rates. Then I opened a new document and started making a list. Assets. Accounts. Properties. Everything Derek and I owned together. I needed to understand exactly what was at stake. The house was the biggest asset. Valued at $5.5 million. Both our names on the deed. My design work had increased its value by over $2 million. That had to count for something. Our bank accounts held roughly $180,000 combined. His business had taken significant investment from both of us. My design business was solely mine, but I'd used joint funds to expand it. It was complicated. It was messy. And it was about to get messier. Derek came upstairs an hour later. He got ready for bed, climbed in beside me and fell asleep within minutes. No guilt. No worry. Just peaceful sleep. I lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling. This man I'd married. This man I'd trusted. This man who'd promised me we'd build something beautiful together. He'd built something all right. He'd built a web of lies. I thought about my family. About their rejection. About how alone I'd felt on my wedding day. And now this. My husband, the one person who was supposed to be on my side, had betrayed me too. But I wasn't that heartbroken bride anymore. I wasn't the daughter begging for her family's approval. I was a successful businesswoman with a television-featured estate and a thriving career. And I was done being betrayed. Tomorrow I would start building my case. I would gather every piece of evidence. I would document everything. And when the time was right, I would walk away from this marriage with my head held high. Derek stirred in his sleep, reaching for me. His arm draped across my waist. I moved away from him, closer to the edge of the bed. As far away as I could get while still sharing the same space. It was symbolic, I realized. We were already miles apart. He just didn't know it yet. The divorce lawyer's name was Patricia Chin. Not my style initially, but Simone assured me she was the best. We met in her downtown office 3 days after I discovered Derek's affair. Patricia was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and efficient. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "The house is your biggest asset," she said when I finished. "You said both names are on the deed?" "Yes, but I did all the design work. The renovations increased the value by over $2 million. That helps. We can argue your labor contribution significantly increased the property value." Patricia flipped through her notes. "And the business?" "His startup is jointly funded. I put in about $70,000 from my design income. We'll need documentation of all financial contributions. Bank statements, wire transfers, everything." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Now about the affair. Your friend saw them together?" "Multiple times. She has photos. I can get hotel records if needed." Patricia nodded approvingly. "Good. Infidelity isn't always relevant in divorce proceedings, but it can influence certain decisions. Have you confronted him yet?" "No. I'm gathering evidence first." "Smart. Keep it that way until we're ready to file." She handed me a folder. "This outlines what I need from you. Bank statements going back 2 years. Property documents. Business records. Proof of the affair. Once I have everything, we'll file and serve him papers." I took the folder. My hands were steady. I felt calm, focused. This was just another project to manage. Another problem to solve. "How long will this take?" I asked. "Depends on how cooperative he is. If he fights, it could take months. If he's reasonable, we could settle relatively quickly." Patricia gave me a sympathetic look. "I know this is difficult, but you're doing the right thing. Document everything. Don't tip your hand. And whatever you do, don't let emotion drive your decisions." I left her office feeling more in control than I had in days. I had a plan, a strategy. All I had to do was execute it. But first, I had another problem to handle. My family kept calling. When I blocked their main numbers, they started using other phones. My cousin Brielle left voicemails. My aunt sent emails. They were persistent. I had to give them that. Finally, my mother showed up at the house. She rang the doorbell repeatedly until I answered. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the foyer. "You can't just cut us out of your life, Natasha. We're your family." "Family is supposed to be there for you," I said tiredly. "Not just when it's convenient." "Your father is hurt," my mother continued as if I hadn't spoken. "He offered you a business opportunity and you walked out. That's not how mature adults handle things." "A business opportunity?" I laughed. "Mom, he wanted me to invest in a failing business. He didn't even congratulate me on the television show before asking for money." My mother's face tightened. "The store isn't failing. It just needs capital for expansion. And yes, the timing might not have been perfect, but families should help each other." "Where was this family loyalty on my wedding day?" I asked. "Where was it when I needed support starting my business? You all made it very clear I wasn't important enough for your time. Now that I'm successful, suddenly you care?" "You're being childish," my mother snapped. "Holding grudges helps no one." "I'm not holding a grudge. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference." We stared at each other. My mother's expression shifted from annoyed to calculating. "Fine," she said. "If that's how you want to be. But you should know your father is talking to Derek." My blood ran cold. "What?" "They've been having lunch. Discussing business ventures. Derek thinks family connections are important." My mother smiled, but it wasn't kind. "He's more reasonable than you are." She left after that, closing the door firmly behind her. I stood in the foyer, my mind racing. Derek was meeting with my father. Behind my back. While having an affair. While I was planning a divorce. What kind of game was he playing? I called Simone immediately. "I need you to find out what my father and Derek are discussing." "On it," she said without asking questions. "I'll call you back." 2 hours later she did. "So your father's business is in worse shape than you thought. He's got creditors calling. The expansion he mentioned? He needs it to stay afloat, not to grow. And Derek? Is apparently considering investing. He and Gabrielle have been discussing it. They think partnering with your father would give them connections in the retail space." Simone paused. "Natasha, I think Derek's using your family connections to benefit his business." Of course he was. My husband, who'd been so kind and understanding when my family rejected us, was now playing both sides. Using my strained relationship to his advantage. "There's more," Simone continued. "Gabrielle has been moving money around. funds from the startup into personal accounts. If I had to guess, she's planning to take the money and run. Can you prove that? Give me a week. I know people who know people. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat down and started planning. If Derek wanted to play games, I could play games too. That night, Derek came home early for once. He seemed excited about something. I have news, he said, grinning. Your father and I had lunch today. He's got this amazing opportunity. Really? I said, feigning interest. Tell me about it. Derek launched into an explanation of my father's business expansion plans. He made it sound like a brilliant investment opportunity instead of a desperate attempt to avoid bankruptcy. I'm thinking of putting in $50,000, Derek said. Maybe more if the numbers look good. Your dad said family investments get priority returns. My dad said that? I kept my voice neutral. Yeah. He also said it would be nice to have you involved too. You know, mending fences. Moving forward. Derek took my hand. I know things have been tense with your family, but this could be a fresh start. I looked at my husband. Really looked at him. He thought he was being clever. Playing mediator between me and my family while secretly funneling money and carrying on an affair. Let me think about it, I said. Of course. No pressure. He kissed my forehead. I just want you to be happy, Natasha. The lies came so easily to him now. Over the next week, I gathered evidence like a woman possessed. Patricia's investigator got the hotel records. Simone tracked down financial documents showing Gabrielle's suspicious transfers. I documented every late night Derek claimed to be working. And I attended one more family dinner. My mother had invited me, claiming she wanted to apologize. I knew it was a setup, but I went anyway. This time without Simone. I wanted to see exactly what they'd do. The whole family was there again. My father, my sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins. They'd prepared a feast. Prime rib. Expensive wine. My mother's famous cheesecake. We're so glad you came, my mother said, hugging me. We've missed you. Missed my money, more like. Dinner was painfully awkward. Everyone tried too hard to be nice. They asked about my business. Complimented my outfit. Laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Then, after dessert, my father cleared his throat. Natasha, I want to apologize, he said. The room went quiet. I handled things poorly with the wedding. With everything. I let pride and expectations get in the way of supporting my daughter. It sounded rehearsed. Practiced. I wondered how many times he'd said those words in front of a mirror. I appreciate that, I said carefully. I hope we can move forward, he continued. Family is important. And I'd like to include you in some exciting business opportunities. Derek and I have been discussing. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. Then I pressed play on a recording. My father's voice filled the room. If we get Natasha invested, we can leverage her television exposure. Use her name to attract other investors. She won't even realize we're using her brand until it's too late. My mother's voice responded, and Derek's on board? He'll convince her? He's desperate to make this work. The affair is making him nervous. He needs money fast to keep that Gabrielle woman happy. Silence. Complete and total silence. I looked around the table at their shocked faces. I recorded our last family dinner, I said calmly. The one where you all discussed how to use me for money and connections. You left your phones on the sideboard. I planted a recording device while using the bathroom. My mother's face went white. My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. You all thought I was too stupid to notice, I continued. Too desperate for family approval to question your sudden interest in my life. But I noticed everything. I stood up, picked up my phone, and walked toward the door. Don't contact me again, I said. Any of you. You're not my family. You're strangers who happen to share my DNA. I left them sitting there in their expensive dining room, surrounded by their expensive things, realizing that the daughter they dismissed had just dismissed them right back. It felt better than I'd expected. Patricia loved the recording. This is perfect, she said, listening to it for the third time. It shows motive, manipulation, and it proves Derek knew about your family's intentions. We can use this. Is it legal? I asked. I mean, recording them without permission? You're in a one-party consent state. As long as you were present during the conversation, which you were, it's admissible. She grinned. You'd make a good lawyer. I smiled, but inside I felt exhausted. Gathering evidence was draining. Every lie I uncovered made me question everything. Had any of it been real? Had Derek ever actually loved me, or had I been a means to an end from the start? Simone's investigator, a guy named Tony, came through with financial records. He spread them across Patricia's conference table during our next meeting. Here's where it gets interesting, Tony said, pointing to highlighted transactions. Gabrielle has been systematically moving money out of the business accounts. Small amounts at first, but increasing over the past 2 months. How much total? I asked. About 85,000 so far. She's smart about it. Different accounts, different times, nothing that would immediately flag fraud. Tony pulled out another document. But here's the thing. She's not acting alone. He showed me transfer records. Derek had authorized every single transaction. They're planning to drain the business, Patricia said, studying the documents. Take the money and probably dissolve the company. Your husband's not just cheating on you, Natasha. He's preparing to leave with nothing left behind. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. It was one thing to have an affair. But this was calculated. Premeditated. Derek had been planning his exit strategy for months. What about my investment? I asked. The 70,000 I put into the startup? Probably gone, Tony said bluntly. Or about to be. I'd recommend freezing any joint accounts immediately. I did exactly that. The next morning, I called our bank and froze our joint checking and savings accounts. Derek would still have access to his business accounts, but our personal funds were locked down. He noticed within hours. What the hell, Natasha? He shouted when he called me. I was at a client meeting reviewing fabric samples. I just tried to transfer money and the account is frozen. Oh, that, I said calmly, excusing myself from the client. I noticed some suspicious activity. I'm sure it's just a banking error. I'll get it sorted out. This is ridiculous. I need access to that money. For what? I asked innocently. He hesitated. Business expenses. I thought the business was profitable? That's what you've been telling me. It is. But we have immediate costs. Natasha, fix this. Today. I'll try, I lied. But you know how banks are. These things take time. I hung up before he could argue further. My hands were shaking. This was the first direct action I'd taken, and it felt like crossing a line. But there was no going back now. That evening, Derek came home furious. He slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. The bank says you froze the accounts, he said, his face red. On purpose. They said you claimed suspected fraud. I'm protecting our assets, I said, staying calm. Until I understand where our money is going. What are you talking about? Derek. I looked him straight in the eyes. I know about Gabrielle. His expression changed. Fear flashed across his face before he could hide it. I don't know what you think you know, he started, but I cut him off. The hotel rooms. The lunches. The money transfers. I know all of it. I walked to my bag and pulled out a folder. Here's copies of everything. Hotel receipts. Financial records. Photos. I threw the folder at him. Papers scattered across the floor. Derek stared at them like they were snakes. Natasha, let me explain. Don't. Just don't. I felt tears threatening but forced them back. I don't want to hear excuses or lies. I just want you to know that I know. It's not what it looks like, he said desperately. Gabrielle and I were business partners. Sometimes things got complicated, but it doesn't mean anything. You're stealing from your own company, I said. Moving money into her personal accounts. Planning to what, disappear? Start over somewhere else. His silence was answer enough. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house. Tonight. Pack your things and leave. Our house, Derek corrected. Both our names are on the deed, remember? You can't just kick me out. He was right. Legally, I couldn't force him to leave, but I could make staying unbearable. Fine, I said. Stay if you want. But I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. And every piece of evidence I've gathered is going to my lawyer. Derek's face went pale. You're overreacting. We can fix this. Go to counseling. Work through things. No, I said firmly. We can't. This marriage is over. I walked upstairs to the guest bedroom and locked the door. I could hear Derek downstairs pacing, talking on the phone. Probably calling Gabrielle. Probably panicking. I didn't care anymore. The next morning, Patricia filed the divorce papers. Derek was served at his office. I wasn't there to see it, but Simone's friend who worked in the building said he'd gone white as a sheet. He called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. He sent texts begging me to reconsider. I blocked his number. That evening, I came home to find him gone. He'd taken his clothes, his laptop, some personal items. The house felt emptier but cleaner somehow. Like a wound that had been cleaned out. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Please reconsider." I threw it in the trash. Over the next 2 weeks, the divorce proceedings got ugly. Derek fought for half of everything. The house, the bank accounts, even tried to claim part of my design business. "He has no legal standing for your business," Patricia assured me. "That's solely yours. But the house will be contentious." "I designed every inch of that house," I said. "I chose every fixture, every paint color. It's my work. And we'll make that argument. But be prepared for a fight." Derek hired his own lawyer, some slick guy named Robert who specialized in high-asset divorces. They argued that Derek's income had funded the renovations, that his business success had made the purchase possible. It wasn't true, but they had paperwork that made it look convincing. "He's trying to take everything," I told Simone over coffee one afternoon. We were sitting in my kitchen, surrounded by legal documents. "After everything he did, he wants to take my house." "He won't win," Simone said firmly. "You have evidence, documentation. The truth is on your side." But I was learning that truth didn't always matter in divorce court. Money mattered. Strategy mattered. Who had the better lawyer? And Derek, despite draining his business accounts, seemed to have plenty of money for legal fees. I wondered if Gabrielle was funding it. Or maybe my father, trying to protect his potential investment. The whole thing was a mess. Then Tony, Simone's investigator, came through with something big. "I found the offshore accounts," he said, showing up at my house late one night. "Derek and Gabrielle opened them 3 months ago. They've moved over $200,000. $200,000. From the business Derek and I had built together. Money I'd helped fund. Can we trace it?" I asked. "Already done. Here's the account numbers, the bank information, everything." Tony handed me a USB drive. "Give this to your lawyer. This proves financial fraud and embezzlement." Patricia nearly cried when I showed her the evidence. "This changes everything," she said. "Derek's been hiding marital assets. That's a huge violation. We can use this to not only get your fair share but potentially get you more." We filed amended paperwork immediately. Derek's lawyer received copies of the offshore account information within hours. Derek called me that night, breaking through my number block somehow. "You're destroying me," he said. His voice sounded hollow. "Gabrielle's gone. She took the money and disappeared. My business is collapsing. And now you're going after everything else." "I'm going after what's mine," I said. "What you tried to steal." "I loved you," he said. "I know you don't believe that now, but I did. I just got confused. Made mistakes." "You made choices," I corrected. "Every lie was a choice. Every secret was a choice. Now you're living with the consequences." I hung up on him. Felt good. Final. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. I got the house. My lawyer negotiated a settlement that gave me back my initial investment in Derek's business plus damages. Derek walked away with essentially nothing. "Congratulations," Patricia said, shaking my hand in the courthouse. "You're officially divorced." I should have felt relieved, victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. But it was over. Derek was gone. My cheating husband. My lying family. All of it was behind me. Now I just had to figure out who I was without all that weight dragging me down. 3 months post-divorce, my life looked completely different. The house was fully mine now, every document signed and notarized. I changed the locks the same day the divorce was finalized. Derek's belongings that he hadn't collected sat in boxes in the garage, waiting for him to schedule a pickup he never bothered to arrange. My design business exploded after the television feature. I hired 2 assistants, a project manager named Sophie and a design associate named Raj. We worked out of my home office, which I'd expanded into what used to be Derek's study. "Another consultation request," Sophie said one morning, handing me a tablet. "High-profile client. Tech executive looking to renovate a 10,000 square foot property in the hills." I reviewed the details. The fee alone would cover my operating costs for 3 months. "Schedule it," I said. "But do a background check first. I'm done working with people who waste my time." Sophie nodded and made notes. She was efficient, organized, everything I needed in an assistant. Simone stopped by that afternoon with lunch. We ate Thai food in my newly redesigned kitchen, which I'd changed after Derek left. I couldn't stand looking at the space we'd planned together. "You look good," Simone said, studying me. "Happy. I'm getting there," I admitted. "Some days are harder than others." "Have you heard from him?" I shook my head. "Nothing. Last I heard, he was working as a contractor for some tech company. Gabrielle apparently cleaned out the offshore accounts and moved to Costa Rica. Karma's real, Simone said, raising her soda can in a mock toast. But my satisfaction was short-lived. That evening I received an email from my sister Renee. The subject line read, "Please read this." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Natasha, I know you said not to contact you, but this is important. Dad's business is bankrupt. He's losing everything. The house might be foreclosed. Mom is devastated. I know you're angry, but we're family. Can we please talk?" I stared at that email for a long time. Part of me felt vindicated. They tried to use me and it had backfired spectacularly. But another part, a smaller part, felt sad. These were still my parents. My sisters. Despite everything, they were still family. But then I remembered my wedding day. Those empty chairs. The dismissive comments. The way they'd only reached out when they wanted something. I deleted the email without responding. The next week, my mother showed up at my house again. This time she looked different. Older. Tired. Her usual perfect appearance was slightly disheveled. "I know you don't want to see me," she said when I answered the door. "But please, just 5 minutes." I should have closed the door. Instead, I let her in. We sat in the living room, a space she'd never seen before. She looked around at the elegant furniture, the artwork, the crystal chandelier. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "You've always had such good taste." I said nothing. Let her fill the silence. "Your father's business is closing," she continued. "The creditors are taking everything. We might lose the house." "I heard," I said. "Derek's investment fell through when you divorced. Without that capital, we couldn't cover the debts." My mother's hands twisted in her lap. "I'm not here to ask for money." "Then why are you here?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Not because we need something from you, but because I was a terrible mother and you deserved better. The apology surprised me. I'd expected more manipulation, more guilt trips, not genuine remorse. "You skipped my wedding," I said quietly. "You made me feel like I wasn't good enough for your time or attention. Do you know how much that hurt?" "I do now," my mother said. "I've spent the last few months thinking about all the things I did wrong. All the ways I let status and appearance matter more than my daughter's happiness. I was cruel. And I'm sorry." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But I'd learned the hard way that people don't change overnight. "Thank you for the apology," I said carefully. "But I need time. A lot of time. I can't just forgive everything because you're going through a hard period." My mother nodded, wiping her eyes. "I understand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. And that I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago." She left after that. I watched her walk to her car, moving slowly like she'd aged 10 years and 10 months. I felt conflicted. Angry but sad. Vindicated but empty. Healing wasn't as straightforward as I'd hoped. Sophie knocked on my office door later that afternoon. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." I looked up from my design sketches. "Who?" She says her name is Gabrielle. My blood went cold. Derek's affair partner. The woman who'd helped destroy my marriage. Was standing in my house. "Tell her to leave," I said. "She says she has information you need. About Derek and your father." I considered it. Part of me wanted nothing to do with her. But curiosity won out. "Fine. 5 minutes. In the foyer. Not in my office." Gabrielle looked different than her photos. Thinner. Worn out. Her designer clothes hung loose on her frame. "Thank you for seeing me," she started, but I cut her off. "You have 5 minutes. Talk." She swallowed hard. "Derek and your father were planning something bigger than you knew. They weren't just doing a business partnership. They were going to use your name and television exposure to launch a whole chain of retail stores. Derek would run operations. Your father would handle retail. And they'd market it all using your design brand." "Without asking me?" I said. "Without telling you. They planned to file paperwork using your signature from old documents. Make it look like you were a willing partner. Then once the business was established, they'd push you out and keep all the profits." I felt sick. "How do you know this?" "Because I helped plan it," Gabrielle admitted. "That was the whole point of the affair. Derek needed me to handle the financial side. I was supposed to set up the corporate structure, move money around, make it all look legitimate." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Derek screwed me over too. Promised me a partnership and a future. Instead, he tried to pin all the embezzlement on me when things fell apart. I had to flee to Costa Rica to avoid charges. Gabrielle pulled out a folder from her bag. Here's all the documentation. Emails, contracts, plans, everything proving what they were going to do. I took the folder but didn't open it. What do you want from me? Nothing, she said. I just thought you should know how deep it went. Derek didn't just cheat on you. He tried to steal your entire professional identity. She left after that. I stood in my foyer holding the folder, feeling numb. That evening, I reviewed everything Gabrielle had provided. It was worse than I'd imagined. They'd created mock-ups using my designs. Written business plans using my television appearance as the central marketing strategy. Even drafted contracts that forged my signature. If the divorce hadn't happened, if I hadn't discovered the affair, they would have done it. They would have stolen my brand, my reputation, my work, and left me with nothing. I called Patricia immediately. I need to file something. Fraud charges. Copyright protection. Something. Send me everything, Patricia said. We'll handle it. By the end of the week, Derek received a cease and desist order. So did my father. Any attempt to use my name, likeness, or designs without permission would result in legal action. Derek called furious. You're being vindictive. I'm protecting myself, I corrected. Something I should have done from the beginning. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I know I messed up. But did you have to destroy everything? I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself. I'm just making sure you can't take me down with you. I hung up and blocked his number. Again. For the final time. That night, I sat in my library with a glass of wine, looking at the walls of books I'd collected. This room had become my sanctuary. A place where I could think and plan and heal. My phone buzzed with a text from Simone. Proud of you. Dinner this weekend? I smiled and typed back, absolutely. I was building a new life. One without Derek. Without my toxic family. Without anyone who saw me as a means to an end. It was lonely sometimes. But it was honest. And after everything I'd been through, honesty felt like the most valuable thing in the world. The lawsuit against Derek and my father moved forward quickly. Patricia was relentless, building a case for attempted fraud, identity theft, and copyright violation. I provided every piece of documentation Gabrielle had given me, plus additional evidence from my own records. They won't fight this, Patricia predicted during one of our meetings. They can't. The evidence is too strong. They'll settle to avoid criminal charges. She was right. Within 2 weeks, both Derek and my father agreed to a settlement. They would cease any use of my name or designs. Derek would pay additional damages for the attempted fraud. My father would acknowledge in writing that he had no claim to my professional brand. It's over, Patricia said when the final papers were signed. You're free of both of them legally and financially. But emotional freedom was harder to achieve. My family made one final attempt to reconcile. They invited me to a family dinner at a neutral restaurant. My mother called personally. Please come, she said. No agenda. No asks. We just want to see you. I almost said no. But Simone convinced me otherwise. Go, she said. Hear them out one last time. Then you'll know for sure whether there's anything worth salvaging. So I went. Alone, despite Simone's offer to accompany me. The restaurant was upscale but not ostentatious. My entire immediate family was there. My parents, both sisters, even my brother who I rarely saw. They looked uncomfortable. My father especially seemed diminished somehow, his usual confidence gone. Thank you for coming, my mother said when I sat down. We know you didn't have to. No, I didn't, I agreed. So what is this about? My father cleared his throat. We owe you an apology. A real one. Not because we need something from you, but because we treated you terribly. I waited. Actions, not words, were what mattered. We missed your wedding because we thought it was beneath us, my father continued. We judged your choices because they didn't match our expectations. And when we finally reached out, it was only because we saw an opportunity to benefit from your success. That's all true, I said. So why should I believe this is different? My sister Renee spoke up. Because we lost everything, Natasha. The business, the house, our reputation. And in losing it all, we realized what actually mattered. Which is? I asked skeptically. You, my mother said simply. We realized too late that we sacrificed our relationship with you for things that don't matter. Status, money, appearances. None of it was worth losing you. It sounded sincere. But I'd heard sincerity before, only to discover manipulation underneath. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. But I can't just forget everything. You weren't there when I needed you. You only showed up when you wanted something. We know, my father said. And we're not asking for forgiveness right now. We're just asking for a chance. Over time. To prove we can do better. I looked around the table at their faces. They looked genuine. Broken but genuine. Time will tell, I said finally. But I need boundaries. No asking for money. No business proposals. No trying to leverage my success for your benefit. If we rebuild a relationship, it's purely personal. Nothing else. They all agreed. Readily. Perhaps too readily. We ate dinner in awkward but not hostile silence. They asked about my business. I gave vague answers. They shared updates about their lives. I listened politely but didn't engage deeply. When dinner ended, my mother hugged me. Thank you for coming. For giving us a chance. I hugged her back stiffly. We'll see how it goes. I left feeling uncertain. Were they genuine? Or was this just another manipulation more subtle than before? Only time would tell. But 3 days later, my sister Renee called. Hey, I know this is awkward, but I need to ask you something. Here it comes, I thought. The real reason for the dinner. My friend is getting married and wants a designer for her venue. Could you give me your rates? I'll pass them along. That was it. No asking for a discount. No expecting free work. Just a professional inquiry. Send me her contact information, I said. I'll reach out directly. Thanks, Natasha. And hey, I really am sorry. About everything. She hung up before I could respond. Small steps. Maybe they were capable of change after all. Or maybe I was being naive. Meanwhile, I heard through the grapevine that Derek had moved to another state. His business had completely collapsed. Gabrielle was facing fraud charges in 2 countries and couldn't return to the United States. Karma's poetic sometimes, Simone said when I told her. They all got exactly what they deserved. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. Yes, they'd faced consequences. But I'd still lost time, energy, and trust in people I should have been able to count on. I don't want revenge anymore, I told Simone. I just want peace. Then build peace, she said simply. You've removed the toxic people. You've protected yourself legally and financially. Now focus on creating the life you actually want. She was right. I'd spent months defending myself, fighting battles, protecting my assets. It was time to move forward instead of looking back. I threw myself into work. My business grew exponentially. I hired more staff. Took on bigger projects. My designs started appearing in magazines and blogs. Luxury Spaces contacted me about a follow-up episode. We want to feature your new projects, Helen said. Show how your business has evolved. I agreed. But this time on my terms. I controlled the narrative. I chose which projects to feature. I made sure every word of my interview reflected my truth, not some edited version designed for drama. The episode aired to rave reviews. My Instagram following doubled overnight. Client inquiries flooded in faster than I could respond. You need to hire another designer, Sophie insisted. We can't keep up with demand. She was right. My little business was becoming an empire, and I needed to build the infrastructure to support it. I hired 2 more designers, both talented young professionals who shared my vision. I rented office space downtown, a beautiful loft with exposed brick and massive windows. I created a portfolio showcasing our best work. And through it all, I maintained my boundaries. My family reached out occasionally. Brief texts. Simple check-ins. Nothing demanding or manipulative. Maybe, slowly, we could build something real. Or maybe not. Either way, I was okay. I'd learned I didn't need their approval to succeed. I didn't need anyone's approval. I just needed to trust myself. 6 months after the divorce, I attended a design conference in New York. It was my first time traveling for work since everything had fallen apart. The conference was incredible. Inspiring speakers. Beautiful exhibitions. Networking opportunities with the best designers in the country. And that's where I met Cameron. Cameron approached me at the closing night reception. He was tall, handsome, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He introduced himself as an architect specializing in sustainable design. I saw your presentation on blending classical and contemporary elements, he said. It was brilliant. The way you described creating spaces that honor history while embracing innovation, that's exactly the philosophy I try to apply to architecture. We talked for 2 hours. About design, about our careers, about our approaches to creating beautiful spaces. He was intelligent, passionate, and genuinely interested in my work. Would you like to grab dinner tomorrow? He asked as the reception wound down. There's an amazing farm-to-table place near my hotel. We could continue this conversation. I hesitated. It had been 6 months since Derek. 6 months of healing and rebuilding. Was I ready for this? Just dinner, Cameron said, reading my hesitation. Two professionals talking shop. No pressure. Just dinner, I agreed. We met the next evening at a small restaurant tucked into a side street. The food was incredible, but the conversation was even better. Cameron told me about his projects, designing eco-friendly buildings that didn't sacrifice beauty for sustainability. I told him about my television feature and my growing business. You've built something impressive, Cameron said. Starting from nothing and creating an empire in less than 2 years. That takes serious talent and determination. And a lot of failures along the way, I admitted. My marriage, my family relationships. I've made plenty of mistakes. We all have, Cameron said. But it's how we recover from mistakes that defines us. And from what I can see, you've recovered pretty spectacularly. We talked until the restaurant closed. Then we walked through the city streets, continuing our conversation beneath the streetlights. I'd like to see you again, Cameron said when we reached my hotel. If you're open to that. I looked at him. Really looked at him. There was no hidden agenda in his eyes. No manipulation. Just honest interest. I'd like that too, I said. We exchanged numbers. He kissed my cheek gently, then walked away. I went up to my room feeling lighter than I had in months. Maybe there was room in my life for something new. Someone genuine. When I returned home, work consumed me again. But Cameron and I stayed in touch. Text messages. Phone calls. Video chats when our schedules allowed. He lived across the country, which made things complicated. But also simple. We could get to know each other without pressure. Without expectations. I have a project in your city next month, Cameron said during one of our video calls. Any chance you'd want to meet up? Absolutely, I said. Meanwhile, my family continued their slow attempts at reconciliation. My mother started texting once a week. Nothing demanding, just checking in. My sister Renee invited me to coffee, which I accepted. I'm getting married, Renee told me over lattes. Nothing big. Just close family and friends. I'd really like you to be there. When? I asked. 3 months. I know it's fast, but we've been together 5 years. Just never had the money for a wedding until now. Renee looked at me nervously. I'm not asking you to design anything or contribute financially. I just want my sister there. It was the first family event they'd invited me to since my own wedding. The wedding they'd all skipped. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I'm asking. I did think about it. Long and hard. Could I sit through a family wedding after they'd skipped mine? Could I watch them celebrate Renee while remembering how they dismissed my happiness? But holding on to anger was exhausting. And Renee at least seemed genuinely trying to make amends. I'll come, I told her 2 weeks later. But I'm bringing Simone. Of course, Renee said, hugging me. Thank you, Natasha. This means everything. Cameron visited my city the following month. We spent 3 days together, exploring restaurants, visiting art galleries, talking endlessly about everything and nothing. I really like you, Cameron said on our last night together. We were sitting in my renovated garden, under string lights I'd hung between the trees. I know the distance is complicated, but I think this could be something real if we give it a chance. I like you too, I admitted, but I'm scared. My last relationship destroyed me. I don't know if I'm ready to trust someone again. I'm not Derek, Cameron said gently. I'm not going to hurt you or use you or betray you. I'm just a guy who thinks you're incredible and wants to see where this goes. I looked at him in the soft light. He was everything Derek wasn't. Honest, direct, secure in himself. Not trying to take from me, just wanting to build with me. Okay, I said. Let's see where this goes. He kissed me then. Soft and sweet and full of promise. Over the next month, Cameron and I navigated the challenges of a long-distance relationship. It wasn't easy, but it was honest, real. Built on mutual respect and genuine affection. My business continued to grow. I landed a contract to design an entire boutique hotel. The project would take a year and triple my company's revenue. You need to celebrate, Simone insisted. This is huge, Natasha. So we threw a party. At my house, in the garden, with everyone who had supported me through the hardest year of my life. My staff. My real friends. People who'd been there when I had nothing to prove. Cameron flew in for the party. Meeting him in person, Simone pulled me aside. He's the real deal, she said. I can tell. Don't let fear keep you from being happy. I'm trying, I said. It's just hard to trust again. I know. But you can't let Derek and your family ruin every future relationship. Cameron isn't them. Give him a fair chance. She was right. Cameron deserved a fair chance. And maybe I deserved happiness. Renee's wedding came 2 weeks later. I wore a beautiful red dress and brought Simone as promised. The ceremony was lovely, simple, and heartfelt. My family was on their best behavior. My mother cried. My father looked genuinely happy. At the reception, my mother approached me. "Thank you for coming. I know it wasn't easy." "No, it wasn't," I admitted. "But I'm trying to move forward." "So are we," my mother said. "Every day we're trying to be better. To be the family you deserved all along." I nodded. Words were easy. But their actions over the past months had shown consistency. Small steps, but consistent ones. Maybe we could build something new. Different from before, but real. Or maybe not. Either way, I was okay. I built a life I was proud of. A business. Real friendships. The beginning of something with Cameron. I didn't need my family to be happy. But maybe, with time and effort, they could be part of my happiness instead of a source of pain. As I danced with Simone at the reception, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not naive hope. Not desperate hope. Just quiet, steady hope that maybe the worst was behind me. That maybe, finally, I could stop fighting and start living. And that felt like victory enough. 1 year after my divorce, my life had transformed completely. My design firm had expanded to 12 employees working out of our downtown loft. We'd completed 15 major projects, including the boutique hotel that had become a landmark in the city. "Another magazine wants to interview you," Sophie said, bringing me coffee one morning. Architectural Digest this time. I smiled. A year ago I would have been nervous. Now interviews felt routine. I'd found my voice, my confidence, my place in the industry. Cameron had become a constant in my life despite the distance. We video chatted every night. He flew in once a month. I visited him when projects allowed. It was working, slowly but surely building something solid. "I'm thinking of relocating," Cameron told me during one of our calls. "Opening a West Coast office. Which would put me in your city." My heart jumped. "Are you serious?" "I've been considering it for months. But I wanted to make sure we were solid first. I didn't want to pressure you or make you feel responsible for my career decisions." He smiled through the screen. "But yes, I'm serious. If you're open to it, I'd like to be closer to you." "I'm very open to it," I said. 3 months later, Cameron moved across the country. We took things slow, not rushing into living together. He found his own apartment, established his business, built his own life in the city. But we spent most evenings together, cooking dinner, watching movies, talking about our days. It felt easy. Natural. Like this was how relationships were supposed to be. My family had maintained their efforts at reconciliation. My mother and I had coffee once a month. My sisters and I texted regularly. My father and I were cordial but distant. Some wounds took longer to heal. "I'm proud of what you've built," my mother said during one of our coffee dates. "Your business, your life. You did it all on your own, and it's incredible." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. Hearing her pride mattered, even though I no longer needed it the way I once had. "I wish I'd supported you from the beginning," she continued. "I wish I'd been at your wedding, cheering you on instead of judging you. I can't change the past, but I want you to know I regret it every day." We were building something new. It wasn't the mother-daughter relationship I'd once hoped for, but it was honest. Real. Based on who we actually were, not who we'd pretended to be. Simone became my business partner officially. She'd been helping with operations for months, and it made sense to make it official. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass at our partnership signing. "You and me building an empire." "To friendship," I countered. "The most important foundation of any business." We clinked glasses, both of us grinning. The following spring, Cameron proposed. Nothing elaborate, just the two of us in my garden on a Sunday morning. He got down on one knee and said, "Natasha, you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. Will you marry me?" I said yes without hesitation. "I want to do this right," I told him afterward. "A real wedding. With everyone who matters." "Whatever you want," Cameron said. "Big or small, fancy or casual. I just want to marry you." We planned the wedding for autumn. A garden ceremony at my estate, the same place where we'd shared our first kiss. But this time it would be full of people who actually cared. As the date approached, I sent invitations to my family. All of them. My parents, my sisters, my extended relatives. Felt like a test. Would they show up this time? The day before the wedding, my mother called. "We're all coming," she said. "Every single one of us." We wouldn't miss it for anything. And they didn't. On my wedding day, the garden was filled with white chairs decorated with burgundy ribbons. And this time, every single chair was occupied. My mother cried through the entire ceremony. My father smiled genuinely. My sisters served as bridesmaids, standing beside Simone, who was my maid of honor. But more importantly, the space was filled with real friends. Colleagues, clients who'd become friends. People who'd supported me through the hardest year of my life and celebrated with me through the best. Cameron and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. Promises about honesty, partnership, and building a life based on mutual respect. I promise to always see you, Cameron said. Not your success or your failures or your potential. Just you exactly as you are, which is more than enough. I cried through my vows. Happy tears this time. When the officiant pronounced us married, the garden erupted in cheers. Real, genuine celebration from people who cared about our happiness. At the reception, my father approached me. I missed your first wedding, he said quietly. It's my greatest regret. Thank you for letting me be here today. Thank you for showing up, I said. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a start. Cameron and I danced our first dance to a song about new beginnings. As we swayed together, I looked around at all the people gathered to celebrate with us. This was family. Not the one I'd been born into, though they were making efforts to be part of it. But the family I'd chosen. The people who'd stood by me when I had nothing. Who celebrated my success without trying to profit from it. Who loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. Happy, Cameron whispered in my ear. Incredibly, I whispered back. 2 years ago, I'd stood on a beach with empty chairs and a broken heart, wondering if I'd made a mistake. If I was worthy of love and celebration. Now I knew the truth. I'd always been worthy. The people who couldn't see that were the ones with the problem, not me. I'd built a business from nothing. Survived betrayal and manipulation. Established boundaries and protected my peace. Found love again with someone who valued me. My family thought my first wedding was ordinary. They'd skipped it because it didn't meet their standards of grandeur and status. But they'd been wrong. That small beach ceremony had been the beginning of my transformation. The moment I'd started learning who I really was and what I deserved. And now, surrounded by people who truly loved me, celebrating a marriage built on honesty and respect, I finally understood. I'd never needed their validation, their acceptance, their presence at my wedding to make it meaningful. I just needed to believe in myself. And finally, beautifully, completely, I did. As the sun set over my garden, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Cameron pulled me close. To new beginnings, he said. To new beginnings, I echoed. And for the first time in years, I felt truly, perfectly at peace. The empty chairs of my past had taught me the most valuable lesson. The people who matter will show up. And the ones who don't aren't worth the space they would have occupied anyway. I'd taken my revenge not through anger or bitterness, but by succeeding spectacularly without them. By building a life so beautiful, so fulfilling, that their absence became irrelevant. That was the best revenge of all. Not needing it anymore. Just living well. Loving fully. And finally being free.
Unaware she inherited her late father's 500 nacional empire, she stood in her dining room as a second-grade teacher, recently honored as Teacher of the Year, listening to her husband, a rising attorney about to make partner, mock her for being beneath his status and demand a divorce because she wasn't worthy of his success. She absorbed every cruel word with quiet composure, her hands steady even as he declared she was nothing compared to what he was becoming. But what he didn't know was that 3 weeks earlier, a manila envelope from her late father's estate attorney had arrived in the mail, sitting unopened on her desk at school because she'd been too consumed with planning their anniversary dinner to read it. The envelope contained documents revealing that her father, the quiet high school janitor she remembered sweeping hallways and packing her lunches in brown paper bags, had secretly built a commercial real estate empire worth $500 million before his sudden death, and she was the sole heir. Her husband, standing in their kitchen with his briefcase and his contempt, had no idea that the woman he was divorcing for being beneath his status was about to become wealthier than he could earn in 10 lifetimes. But would she tell him the truth before signing the papers? Or would she let him beg to come back after discovering what he'd thrown away? And when he finally learned that the Teacher of the Year he mocked was now the owner of the very building where his law firm leased office space, what would she do with the power to decide his professional future? The Tuesday night in October, when everything shattered, began like any celebration should, with her hands covered in lemon zest and hope. She had spent 3 hours preparing his favorite meal, the cold salmon with dill sauce her mother used to make, the one that required precision timing and a specific Portuguese white wine she'd driven across town to find. The dining room table glowed with new candles she'd bought that morning, their light catching the crystal glasses her grandmother had left her, the same glasses she'd wrapped in newspaper and carried in a cardboard box when she moved into this house 5 years ago, as a bride who believed love could fill any space. The Teacher of the Year plaque sat propped against the centerpiece, still in its velvet presentation box, because she wanted him to see it first, wanted to watch his face when he realized his wife, the one he sometimes introduced as just a teacher, had been recognized by the entire district for excellence. She checked her phone again at 7:30, then 8, then 8:45, watching the salmon grow cold and the candles burn down to stubs, and somewhere in the waiting, she remembered the manila envelope that had arrived 3 weeks earlier, the one from Whitmore and Associates estate attorneys with the return address in Hartford, Connecticut. She'd left it unopened on her desk at school, buried under spelling tests and permission slips, because the sender's name had triggered a memory of her father's funeral 6 months ago. The small service where only 12 people came to mourn a high school janitor who died of a heart attack while cleaning the gymnasium after a basketball game. She hadn't wanted to think about estate paperwork or final bills during anniversary week. Hadn't wanted grief to color what should have been celebration. So she'd pushed the envelope to the back of her mind the same way she pushed down the growing suspicion that her husband's late nights weren't all about case preparation. When he finally walked through the door at 10:47, his tie already loosened and his expression carved from stone, she stood from the table with a smile that felt like lifting weights. He didn't apologize. He didn't acknowledge the cold food or the burned-down candles or the plaque that represented a year of staying late to tutor struggling readers and creating a classroom library with her own money. Instead, he set his briefcase down with the decisive click of a man about to deliver a verdict and launched into a monologue that sounded rehearsed, each word selected for maximum damage. He told her he was about to make partner, that his trajectory was ascending while hers had plateaued in a second-grade classroom, that he'd made a mistake marrying someone whose ambitions ended with construction paper and parent-teacher conferences. His voice carried the measured cruelty of closing arguments as he explained that from now on, he would decide when they spoke and how they spent time together. Because his career demanded a wife who understood hierarchy, and she clearly didn't understand that teaching phonics to 7-year-olds didn't put her on his level. She absorbed each word with a stillness that surprised her, feeling something inside her chest not break but crystallize into clarity. And as he talked about status and levels and the difference between people who build empires and people who babysit other people's children, she thought about her father again. The quiet man who'd packed her lunches in brown paper bags with handwritten notes tucked inside, who taught her to read before kindergarten using newspaper comics and patience, who died in a gymnasium wearing a janitor's uniform with his name embroidered in red thread above the pocket. She didn't tell her husband about the envelope that night. She didn't tell him that her father, the man he'd met exactly once at their wedding and dismissed with a handshake that lasted less than 3 seconds, might have left her something worth examining. Instead, she listened until his monologue ended, watched him walk to the bedroom without touching her, and stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by the ruins of her celebration. The candles had burned out completely. The salmon looked gray in the darkness. The plaque caught a sliver of moonlight through the window, its gold lettering announcing her as Teacher of the Year in a script that suddenly seemed defiant rather than decorative. She cleared the table in silence, wrapping the uneaten food in aluminum foil with mechanical precision, and when she finally climbed into bed at 1 a.m, careful not to disturb the man already asleep on his side of the mattress, she made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff into open air. She would give him exactly what he asked for. Silence so complete he'd feel its weight in every room of this house. And tomorrow, during her lunch break, she would drive to school and open that manila envelope, the one she'd been avoiding because grief felt too heavy to carry alongside hope. Something in her father's careful life whispered to her across 6 months of death, suggesting that the janitor who'd raised her alone after her mother left might have understood more about empires than anyone suspected. The next morning arrived with cruel sunshine that made the dining room look even worse in daylight. She woke at 5:30, her internal alarm clock trained by years of early teaching schedules, and moved through the house like she was remembering choreography from a play she'd stopped performing. She made coffee for one, measuring grounds with the precision she brought to lesson planning, and when he emerged from the bedroom at 6:15 expecting his cup already prepared with 2 sugars and cream, she met his confusion with polite indifference that felt like speaking a new language. He asked where his coffee was, his voice carrying the irritation of someone whose routine had been disrupted, and she gestured toward the pot with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, suggesting he help himself since he'd established new household rules the night before. The flicker of surprise on his face fed something hungry inside her. She ate her breakfast, Greek yogurt with honey and almonds, while reading the news on her phone, ignoring his presence at the table the way he'd ignored her salmon and candles. When he attempted conversation about his day, she responded with single words, "Okay, sure, fine." Each monosyllable landed like a period at the end of a sentence he couldn't finish. She left for school at 7:15 without saying goodbye, her Teacher of the Year plaque tucked in her bag alongside the envelope she'd finally decided to confront. And as she drove through morning traffic toward the elementary school where she'd taught for 8 years, she felt something she hadn't experienced in her entire marriage, the lightness of not caring what he thought. Her classroom smelled like crayons and possibility when she arrived, the familiar scent grounding her as she set her bag on the desk and pulled out the manila envelope that had been haunting her periphery for 3 weeks. The return address stared back at her, Whitmore and Associates, Estate Attorneys, Hartford, Connecticut. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal, that irrational fear that official mail always brings mixed with curiosity about why her father's estate would require attorneys from Hartford when he'd lived his entire life in a small apartment above a hardware store in their hometown. The first document she unfolded was a cover letter on expensive letterhead, the kind with embossed text and weight that suggested importance, and the opening line made her sit down hard in her desk chair. "Dear Ms. Patricia Henshaw, we are writing to inform you that as the sole beneficiary of your late father, Mr. Robert James Henshaw, you have inherited his complete estate, currently valued at approximately $500 million. She read the sentence 3 times, certain she'd misunderstood or that someone had made a catastrophic typo, but the numbers remained unchanged, and as she forced herself to continue reading, the impossible story of her father's secret life unfolded in legal language that felt like discovering a novel written in invisible ink. Her father, the janitor who'd raised her on modest means, who'd driven a 15-year-old Toyota and shopped at discount grocery stores, had apparently spent 40 years quietly buying commercial real estate properties across New England, starting with a single foreclosed warehouse he'd purchased for $30,000 in 1984 and building an empire so discreet that even his own daughter had no idea she'd been raised by a man worth $500 million. The letter explained that Robert Henshaw had operated through a series of holding companies and trusts designed to maintain absolute privacy, that his janitorial work had been a choice rather than necessity, a way to stay grounded and connected to regular people, while his investments compounded in the background. The attorney's letter listed properties she'd never heard of: office buildings in Hartford, Boston, and Providence, warehouse complexes in Connecticut and Massachusetts, retail centers that generated millions in annual rent from tenants who had no idea their landlord spent his days mopping floors and emptying trash cans. There were spreadsheets attached, pages of financial statements showing income and assets that made her teaching salary look like pocket change, and at the bottom of the stack, a handwritten letter from her father on lined notebook paper, the kind he used to write her lunch notes on, his familiar script bringing tears to her eyes before she'd read a single word. "My dear Patricia," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably confused as hell. I'm sorry I never told you the truth about the money. I watched my own father destroy himself chasing wealth, watched him ignore family for profit, and I swore I'd never let money define me or corrupt the one thing that mattered: you. I worked as a janitor because it kept me humble, because it let me be present at your school when you were growing up, because honest work feeds the soul in ways that collecting rent checks never could. But I also understood that money is freedom, and I wanted you to have freedom when you were old enough to use it wisely. The attorneys will help you navigate everything. But here's what matters. You're now the owner of properties that include the Whitmore Tower in Boston, the Maritime Building in Providence, and the Hartford Commerce Center. You're wealthy beyond what most people dream of, but more importantly, you're free to choose the life you want rather than the life circumstances force on you. Use this freedom to be happy, to leave any situation that diminishes you, to never let anyone make you feel small. Your mother left because she couldn't understand why I chose janitorial work when I had money. Don't let anyone else's inability to see your worth determine your path. I love you. Build something beautiful with this freedom. Dad. She sat in her classroom for 20 minutes after reading his letter, tears streaming down her face while second graders shouted on the playground outside her window, their joy a counterpoint to the earthquake, reshaping her understanding of everything. Her father had been a secret millionaire. No, a secret multimillionaire who'd chosen to mop floors and pack her humble lunches and live in a modest apartment because he valued presence over prestige. And now she owned buildings, including ones she'd walked past 100 times without knowing they belonged to her bloodline. The irony hit her like a physical force. Her husband had spent last night explaining that she was beneath his status, that teaching made her small, that his partnership would elevate him above her, but she was now wealthy enough to buy his entire law firm 10 times over. The Hartford Commerce Center, she pulled out her phone and searched the address, was a gleaming office tower in downtown Hartford, home to law firms, financial consultancies, and corporate headquarters. She scrolled through the building's website, looking at the tenant directory, and her breath caught when she saw the listing for his firm. Blackwell, Morrison & Chase LLP, floors 15 to 17. Her husband's law firm, the place where he was about to make partner. The symbol of his superiority over her was leasing space in a building she now owned. She was his landlord. The woman he'd declared beneath his level was literally above him in the most concrete way possible. The bell rang for first period, and she wiped her tears, tucked the documents back into the envelope with shaking hands, and stood to welcome her students with a smile that felt like it belonged to someone else. 23 second graders filed into her classroom with their backpacks and their questions and their complete faith that she knew everything about everything, and she taught them about vowel sounds and addition with her usual patience, while her mind spun with possibilities. During her lunch break, she called Whitmore and Associates and spoke with the attorney who'd sent the package. A woman named Victoria Chen, who explained the inheritance in detail and offered to connect her with financial advisors who specialized in managing large estates. Patricia asked only one question that mattered. Can I access these funds immediately? Victoria's answer was yes. The estate had cleared probate, everything was in order, she just needed to sign transfer documents and the money would be hers to control. Patricia made an appointment for Saturday morning in Hartford, thanked Victoria with a calmness she didn't feel, and hung up the phone with trembling hands. Then she sat alone in her classroom, eating a turkey sandwich she couldn't taste, and made the second decision that would define everything that followed. She wouldn't tell her husband about the inheritance. Not yet, maybe not ever. He'd asked for silence and distance, claimed she was beneath him, demanded control of their communication, and she would give him exactly what he requested while quietly building an escape route paved with her father's legacy. The revenge forming in her mind wasn't loud or dramatic. It was strategic, patient, and devastating in its simplicity. She would let him believe she was the small teacher he could dismiss, would let him proceed with whatever plans he'd made about their marriage, would document every cruel word and dismissive gesture while sitting on a fortune that made his partnership bonus look like a tip at a restaurant. And when the time came to reveal the truth, she would do it in a way that would haunt him forever. That evening, she came home to find him on the couch with takeout Chinese food, his tie discarded and his expression somewhere between confusion and irritation. He asked where she'd been, why she hadn't texted, whether she'd forgotten they usually watched their show on Wednesday nights. She met his questions with the same polite indifference from breakfast, explaining she'd had pottery class, a lie but one that established independence, and wasn't hungry for dinner. His confusion deepened when she went straight to the bedroom, changed into comfortable clothes, and settled on the bed with a book she didn't read, her mind too busy calculating next steps. He appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, his posture suggesting he wanted to talk but didn't know how to start, and she felt a flicker of satisfaction at his discomfort. He was beginning to notice that the household machinery he'd taken for granted, the prepared meals, the maintained schedule, the emotional labor of keeping their life running smoothly, had suddenly stopped operating. She wasn't serving him anymore, wasn't anticipating his needs, wasn't performing the role of supportive wife he'd assigned her. The silence he'd demanded was costing him more than he'd calculated, and they were only 2 days into her experiment. She wondered how long it would take before he started to unravel, before the weight of running his own life without her infrastructure became unbearable. Part of her, the part that had absorbed his cruelty in the dining room, hoped it would hurt. But a deeper part, the part connected to her father's wisdom about freedom and worth, simply wanted to be free of him entirely, to walk away from this marriage with her dignity intact and her future secure. The $500 million wasn't revenge money, it was freedom money, and freedom, she was learning, tasted better than any vengeance. The following days unfolded with careful choreography as she rebuilt her life while living in the same house as a man who was slowly realizing he'd been essential to her existence, but she'd been vital to his. She started waking at 5, leaving for the gym before he got up, returning to shower and dress for work, while he stumbled around the kitchen looking for clean coffee mugs that were no longer magically appearing in the cabinet. His dry cleaning went uncollected because she'd always been the one to remember pickup days. His favorite shirt stayed wrinkled because she'd stopped doing his laundry along with her own. The refrigerator emptied because she stopped grocery shopping for 2, buying only what she needed for her own meals, and watching his confusion grow when he opened the door to find yogurt, salad ingredients, and wine meant for one person. She met his increasingly desperate questions with calm explanations. She'd taken him at his word about establishing new boundaries, about him deciding when they interacted, about her not being on his level. If she was beneath him, surely he didn't need her managing the mundane details of his elevated life. The logic was airtight, and watching him struggle to find a counter-argument fed the cold satisfaction growing in her chest. Meanwhile, on Saturday morning, she drove to Hartford and signed papers that made her one of the wealthiest women in New England. Walked out of Whitmore and Associates with access to bank accounts she still couldn't quite believe were real, and stopped at a coffee shop to sit with her new reality. She ordered an expensive latte without checking the price, pulled out her phone, and did something she hadn't done in 5 years of marriage. She looked at apartment listings in the city, beautiful spaces with hardwood floors and natural light, places where she could build a life that belonged entirely to her. By the second week of her silence campaign, he was calling her during work hours, something he'd never done before, leaving voicemails that progressed from confused to irritated to something approaching panic. She didn't call back. She redirected her energy toward the life she was constructing in secret. She met with a divorce attorney her friend had recommended, a sharp woman named Margaret Torres, who listened to her story with the focused intensity of someone who'd seen this pattern before and knew exactly how to dismantle it. Margaret explained Massachusetts divorce law with clinical precision. Their assets would be divided equitably, his partnership and income potential were marital property, and more importantly, any inheritance received during the marriage was typically considered separate property, meaning the $500 million was hers alone. Patricia felt a weight lift from her shoulders she hadn't known she was carrying. She wouldn't need his money or his approval to leave. She was leaving from a position of absolute financial power, and he had no idea. Margaret helped her document everything. The cruel speech on their anniversary, his pattern of dismissiveness, text messages where he'd demeaned her career, emails where he'd excluded her from social events with his colleagues because she was just a teacher who wouldn't fit in with successful people. They built a case methodically, brick by brick, creating a foundation for divorce proceedings that would be swift and decisive. And through it all, Patricia maintained her silence at home, watching him deteriorate in real time as the infrastructure of his comfortable life collapsed around him. On day 12, she came home from her actual pottery class, She'd enrolled after using it as a cover story, discovering she loved the meditative process of shaping clay, to find him sitting at the dining room table with his head in his hands, his laptop open to what looked like work documents, but his eyes unfocused and exhausted. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the cracks in his polished exterior. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble he hadn't shaved, a stain on his shirt that suggested he'd been wearing it for more than one day. He asked if they could talk, his voice stripped of the courtroom confidence he'd wielded 2 weeks earlier, and she set down her bag with deliberate slowness, folded her arms, and told him she was listening. He launched into an apology that sounded rehearsed but desperate, explaining that he'd been under stress about the partnership, that he'd said things he didn't mean, that he missed her and wanted to fix their marriage. She listened without expression, noting the careful absence of any real accountability. He blamed stress, not character, circumstances, not choices. When he finished, she asked a single question that cut through his performance. "Are you apologizing because you realize you were wrong, or because you realize I've stopped making your life easy?" The silence that followed gave her the answer. His face cycled through emotions, surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on something like shame. She told him she needed time to think, that 2 weeks of silence couldn't undo years of feeling diminished, and walked to the bedroom while he sat frozen at the table. That night, she slept deeply for the first time since their anniversary, dreaming of her father sweeping gymnasium floors while owning the building he cleaned, understanding finally that his lesson had been about never letting external validation determine internal worth. The break came on day 15, during her lunch period at school, when he appeared in the lobby carrying an enormous bouquet of roses that looked absurd against his expensive suit and desperate eyes. Teachers stopped in the hallway to watch, their curiosity palpable, and Patricia felt a surge of irritation at him for bringing their private disaster into her professional space. She walked toward him slowly, her Teacher of the Year composure firmly in place, and asked what he was doing there. His apology was public this time, loud enough for witnesses, full of promises about counseling and change, and recognizing her value. He suggested dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their first date, his voice carrying the charm he probably used in court to sway juries, and for a moment she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then she remembered the cold salmon and his monologue about levels and hierarchy, remembered her father's letter about never letting anyone make her feel small, and she delivered the line she'd been rehearsing in her head for 2 weeks. "You told me you would decide when we spoke and spend time together. I'm just following the rules you established. I don't recall you deciding we should have dinner tonight." The logic landed like a slap. His face went through another series of emotions before settling on anger, the mask finally dropping to reveal what had always been underneath his polish: entitlement. He called her manipulative, accused her of playing games, suggested she was being emotionally abusive by withholding communication, and she laughed, the sound sharp and clean and utterly without humor. She told him she had her own apartment now, that she'd be moving her things out this weekend, and watched his carefully constructed apology crumble into ash. He dropped the roses, actually dropped them on the lobby floor like a child having a tantrum, and she walked away down the hallway while her colleagues watched in stunned silence. Behind her, she heard him calling her name, but she didn't turn around. The woman who was beneath his level had just walked out of his control, and the roses wilted on the linoleum like a memorial to his arrogance. That weekend, Margaret Torres filed divorce papers that landed on his desk at Blackwell, Morrison, and Chase on Monday morning at 9:15, delivered by a process server who found him in a conference room with 3 partners and a client. Patricia received the confirmation text, delivered, while teaching her second graders about the water cycle, and she felt a surge of satisfaction so pure it almost frightened her. She'd stopped being the supporting character in his story and become the author of her own, and the plot she was writing had a very specific ending. That evening, she changed her phone number, blocked him on all social media platforms, and began the systematic process of erasing him from her life with the same methodical precision she brought to lesson planning. His family started reaching out, his mother, his sister, colleagues who thought they were helping, but she ignored every attempt at contact, her boundaries now absolute. Then his sister sent a text to her old number that somehow reached her through a mutual friend. Apparently, he'd been telling his family for months that their marriage was over, that he planned to leave Patricia after making partner because she was holding him back professionally. The revelation should have hurt, but instead it clarified everything. He'd been planning his exit while she cooked his dinners and managed his life, had been positioning himself to leave her after securing his partnership, probably had already selected a replacement wife who better fit his image of success. Her only regret was that she'd beaten him to it, and that her version of leaving came with resources he couldn't imagine. The next phase of her carefully constructed revenge began 3 weeks after the divorce filing, when she had her attorney send a letter to Blackwell, Morrison, and Chase regarding their lease at Hartford Commerce Center. The letter was professional, almost bland, introducing Patricia Henshaw as the new owner of the building and requesting a meeting to discuss lease renewal terms that were coming up in 6 months. She imagined his face when he saw her name on the letterhead, imagined him connecting the dots between his soon-to-be ex-wife and the landlord who controlled his firm's office space, and the image filled her with a joy so dark it should have concerned her, but didn't. She wasn't planning to evict them. That would be too obvious, too petty, too easy to spin as vindictive, but she wanted him to know that she had power over his professional environment, that the woman he deemed beneath his status was literally above him in the building hierarchy. The irony was too perfect to resist. Margaret loved the move, calling it elegant psychological warfare, and helped her craft additional letters to other properties where his firm's partners had investments or connections. Nothing threatening, nothing actionable, just gentle reminders that Patricia Henshaw owned a significant portion of Hartford's commercial real estate and would be taking a more active role in management going forward. She was establishing herself in his professional world as someone who couldn't be ignored or dismissed, someone whose presence would be a constant reminder of what he'd thrown away. 4 weeks after the divorce filing, he showed up at her new apartment. She still didn't know how he'd found the address, carrying 2 coffee cups from their old cafe and wearing an expression of practiced vulnerability that probably worked on juries, but left her completely unmoved. She opened the door just wide enough to block entry, her body language making clear he wasn't welcome inside, and listened to his rehearsed speech about therapy breakthroughs and self-awareness and understanding now what he'd failed to see before. He used words like growth and healing and partnership with the conviction of someone who'd spent hours with a counselor learning the vocabulary of redemption, but his eyes told a different story. They were calculating, scanning her apartment for clues about her new life, trying to gather information he could use. She let him finish his performance, then asked the single question that mattered. Is this about love or about damage control before your partnership review? The silence that followed was answer enough. His face went blank, then defensive, then he tried to pivot to anger, demanding to know who she thought she was, to question his motives, reminding her that he was about to make partner at one of Hartford's most prestigious firms. And that's when she decided to detonate the bomb she'd been carefully constructing. She told him the truth, that she was the owner of the Hartford Commerce Center, that his firm paid rent to her holding company, that she'd inherited more money than he would earn in multiple lifetimes, and that the janitor father he'd met once and dismissed had built an empire while mopping floors. The information hit him like a physical force. She watched him process it in stages. Disbelief, then skepticism, then dawning horror as he realized she wasn't lying, that the woman he'd called small and beneath him was now one of the wealthiest people in Connecticut. His reaction was everything she'd hoped for, and somehow still disappointing. He cycled through emotions rapidly, shock giving way to anger, giving way to calculation, giving way to something that looked like he was running numbers in his head, probably trying to figure out what his share of $500 million would be in the divorce. She watched him arrive at that conclusion, saw the moment his apology transformed into strategy, and she delivered the final blow with a smile that felt like victory. It's inheritance, which means it's separate property. You get nothing from my father's estate. The only thing you're entitled to is half of what we built together during our marriage, which is basically this house and your partnership potential. The words landed like grenades. He tried to argue, started citing case law about asset division, threatened to drag out the divorce and make it expensive, and she simply laughed, the same sharp, clean sound from the school lobby. She reminded him that she had documentation of everything, that she had recordings of his phone calls and screenshots of his texts, that she had witnesses to his public meltdown at her school, and that she had resources to pay attorneys forever, if necessary. Then she told him the part that would haunt him the longest. "You were right that we weren't on the same level. You just misjudged the direction. I teach children to read and think and be kind. You teach corporations to exploit loopholes and avoid taxes. My level is about building human beings. Your level is about billing hours. We were never in competition because we weren't playing the same game." His face went pale, then red, then gray. And she closed the door while he was still standing in her hallway holding his coffee cups like props in a play that had ended without him noticing. She poured both coffees down her sink, rinsed the cups, and placed them in her recycling bin with the same calm efficiency she brought to everything now. The air in her apartment felt cleaner somehow, as if closing the door on him had released toxic fumes she'd been breathing for years. The divorce finalized 4 months later in a conference room that smelled like furniture polish and barely contained hostility. They sat across from each other at a mahogany table that probably cost more than most people's cars, their attorneys flanking them like seconds in a duel, and signed papers that dissolved 5 years of marriage in approximately 30 minutes. She reclaimed her maiden name, Patricia Henshaw, the name her father had carried while building his secret empire, and received her settlement, which was tiny compared to her inheritance, but felt symbolically important anyway. She kept the house they'd shared because she decided she wanted to sell it and donate the proceeds to her school's literacy program, a final act of transformation that would turn their shared history into something useful for children who needed books. He kept his partnership, which he'd finally achieved 3 weeks earlier in a ceremony she heard about through mutual friends, but didn't attend. She watched him across that conference room table as he signed the final documents, and what struck her most was how small he looked, not physically but existentially, as if the dissolution of their marriage had revealed that his impressive exterior had been hollow all along. Her attorney, Margaret, squeezed her hand under the table when the last signature was complete, a gesture of solidarity that meant more than the settlement check. They left through different exits, her idea, because she didn't want to share even a parking lot with him anymore. The sunlight outside felt warmer than normal, or maybe she was just feeling warmth for the first time in years. The heat of freedom finally reaching skin that had been cold for too long. 6 months after the divorce, Patricia sat in her apartment on a Sunday morning, surrounded by pottery she'd made herself. Bowls and vases and cups that were imperfect but beautiful. Proof that she could create things with her own hands, and drank coffee that tasted better than any she'd ever had. Her second graders had just finished their spring showcase, where they'd read poems they'd written about things that mattered to them, and 3 kids had written about Mrs. Henshaw, their teacher who believed they could do anything. She'd cried at her desk after school that day, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming rightness of her life's direction. The revenge she'd taken on her ex-husband wasn't really revenge at all. It was reclamation. She'd reclaimed her name, her identity, her worth, her future, and most importantly, her understanding that external validation couldn't define internal reality. Her father had known that truth, had lived it every day while pushing a mop across floors he owned, and now she carried his lesson forward in her own way. She taught children to read because reading was freedom, because literacy was power, because the ability to understand the world through text was the foundation of everything else. And she owned buildings because her father had given her that gift, but she never let the buildings own her. She donated to schools, funded literacy programs, sat on boards for educational nonprofits, and lived in a 2-bedroom apartment that cost a fraction of what she could afford because she didn't need marble and granite to prove her worth. Her ex-husband had wanted partnership and prestige and the external markers of success. She had wanted freedom and purpose, and the internal knowledge that her life mattered. The punishment she'd given him wasn't financial or professional. It was the knowledge that he'd had something real and chosen, something hollow, that he'd valued the wrong things and lost the right person, and that he would spend the rest of his life knowing that the woman he'd called small had been standing on a mountain while he measured himself with a ruler. That knowledge would follow him through every partnership meeting, every social event, every moment he looked at successful women and wondered if they too had hidden depths he was too shallow to recognize. And Patricia, for her part, would wake up every morning in her imperfect apartment, drink her perfect coffee, and go teach children that worth was internal and freedom was the greatest inheritance of all. Proof that the most elegant revenge was simply living well.